Chilean prime ko Usman ab Bisirktha, Jungkatam ho Chukithi, Mugaruski Nishinian Harjaga, Bikri Huithi, Jail Hu buildings, Thuan Nugalti machines, Ar Lashan Kither, Yes Surf Ik battlefield Nahitha, Balki Insani civilization or alien empires, Ki Darmian Hon Waliak, Taba Kun Jum K Natijatha. Commander Ryan Wolf Apni Rifle Ko Taipakre, Ajbar Rahatha, Usk Sath do Or Soldiers Thay, Miles or Carter, Jo UC Ki Tara Mission Parthe. Unka Maxed Thaik Secret Distress Signal, Ka Sarad Lagana, Jo Ik Chodi Sai Basti Se Ayatha. Ryan Ki Dil Mean, Ik Ajib Bikanitha. Yes Surf Ik Ar Patrol Nahi Lag Rahatha, Yek Kuchalagtha. Pura area Ik Ajib, Sai Kamoshi Mean Duba Watha. Surf Hawa, Ka Halka Sashor Sinai, Te Rahatha Jo destroyed buildings Ki Beach Se, Guzar Rahatha. Kahin Dor, Ek Jali Kui building Ka Dancha Thir Gur Rahatha. Duwan Asman Mean Gol Rahatha. Ryan Ne Apni Hudpar thermal scan activate Kaya. Magar Koi movement Nahithe. Yet Jaga Murdathe. Sir, Muji Ye Pasan Nahi A Raha, Miles Neither Se Kaha. Uski Awaz Helmet Kikams Mean Darways Sitakra, Kar Wapazai. Yahan Kuch To Gadbad Hai. Stay alert, Ryan Ne Surf Itna Kaha. Uska Instinct, K Rahatha Ki Ye Jaga, Surf Ik Battlefield Nahithai. Yahan Kuch Hupatha. Wo Tezi Se Ik Chodi Sai. Dirty Kui building Ki Andar Guse. Andar Har Taraf. Surf Tabai Thai. Tuti Kui walls. Jail Hu furniture. Ar Kahin Kum Ki Nishan. Ek Kon Hin Ik Kurani metal shelf Gur Chuki Thi. Uski Nich Ik skeleton dick. Raha the Jo Ab Surf Rock Ar broken bones. Kether Ban Chukatha. Lakin Fir Rayan Ka Nazar Ikar Cheese Parpari. Ek Chodi Sai. Adhi Jali Hui blanket. Jo Ab V Hill Rahite. Uska Dil Ik second Ki Lai Ruk Gaya. Yahawa Ki Waja Se Nadi Hill Rahite. Usin Hoth Barhaya or Thir Sea Blanket Athai. Usk Nich Jo Dika. Uzn Ryan Koik Pal Ki Lai Shakt Kardlia. Tu Chodi, Buki, Or Kamzor Alien Ladkian. Ik Duzre Si Liptigui. Dono Ki Chair Midi Se Bear Thay, Capt Fadigui, Or Ki Ankine, Bari, Gary, Or Kupi, We Nadamat Stay, Barigui. Wo Luras Rahi Thi, Jais Kisi Nightmare Si Nikol Kar Yahan Aiho. Ik Second Ki Lai Surf Kamoshi Radi. Surf Unki Hockey Sai Sonson Kiawaz Sanai to Raite. A. Sir. Carter Ne Peach, Se Ka. Bugger Uski Awazmin Confusion The. Ye Vel Kari Hain. Ryan Nabina Joab Dai Dono Alien Twins Kodeka. Wo Vel Kari Species Ki Ik Mizalthai. Lambi Pointed Ears. Hockey Neely Chanak Wali Jild. Ar Sir Par Ik Ajib Se Glowing Pattern Jo Thir Tez Ho Raithi. Mugar Sebs Ziada Disturbing Cheese T Unki Ankine. Jismine Surf Book. Gum. Or Ik Ajib Sai Thi. Jays Ye Sok Rahi Ho Ki Ab Kia Hoga. Iki Pal Ki Lai Ran Ni Soka Ku Wo In He Korde. Ye Unka Mission Nahitha. Ye Aliens Thay. Or Human Soldiers Ko Kam Thay Humans Ko Thumna. Na Ki Kisi Or Species Ko Bakana. Likin Jabas Ndeka Ki Ik Twin. Jo Thodi Body Lag Raithi. Apni Kodi Bihan Ko Tight Pakre Huthai. Jais Uska Surf Ik Kam. Thabuski Hifazat Karna. Tab Uska Dil Ik Second Ki Lai Pale Gaya. Sir. Humane Chalna Chahai. Miles Nekaha. Likin Uksk Ken Se Pil Ik Cheese. Badal Chuki The. Ek Sharpawaz Hawamin Gumj Gai. Pak. Ik Sniper Ki Goli Ik Soldier Ki Sarse Guzar Chuki The. Wo Bina Kisiawaz Kagira. Surf ik second ka wakt laga our surf ik lahu ka chenta hawa mean of Gaia. Ryan lightning speed si apni rifle luthata high or cover mean gur jata high. Ambush. Carter chica. Likin uskia was high hawa mean gum hogai jabik ar goli usk armor se guzargai. Ya bounty hunters they. Mercenaries Joe battlefield see bak kache velkari refugees kopakad car slave markets mean bekt they. Ryan ki pas sokni ka wakt naitha. Uznbina sok apni cloaking device activate ki. Twins ko apni combat armor ki andar chupaya. Or fire coldaya. Pure battlefield mean ik ag lag gai. Laser beams ik disray si takra rahithi. Ik explosion itna karibi theki ran. Ko laga usk kanpati si kumbe rahahai. Likin usk movements fast are calculated thi. Hike hunter side se aya. Likin ryan nibina sok uska gala kat daya. Uski lashnish gurgai. Dusra hunter ik grenade fenka. Maga ryan us grenade ko hawa mean goli mar kar wapas usk kuraf. They juya. Boom. Iki pal ki lai sab kuch slow hogaya. Ryan ko mesus hua ki usk hoth kun se berhain. Magar uska mission clear tha. Wo twins ko mar nahi de saktatha. Ik bounty hunter niak last shot mara jo direct eris. Ki surpar ja saktatha. Magar tavi nix ni apni. Shupi huitakad dikai. Ik second ki lai uski ankain chamki. Or sniper ki goli hawa mean hi ruk gai. Wo their ulti ho gai. Or wapas sniper ki dil mean. Gus gai. Ik instant kill. Ryan shocked the. Yes surf bookie or kamzor labkian nahithe. Ye kuch arthi. Lekin ab wakt nahi the saknika. Ik our wave of hunters a rahithe. Ryan nibina soch ik grenade Nicola or ik signal deja apni escape ship ko. Hold on, Uzn twins seka. Jo ab vihusk saf lipti huithe. We're getting out of here. Uzn grenade fenka. Ik bright white flash. Hard jaga surf duan hai duantha. Jad wu clear wa. Bounty hunters surf jalik wilashan. Ki terra paithe. Ryan bina, hiche deki bog rahatha. Dono twins ko apn soth lakar. Yes surf ik rescue mission naitha. Yek kuch artha. Uska mission the humans ko bakana. Magar ab wo ik hore alien race ke zimdar ban gayatha. Or uska decision ab uski apni John save he menga par saktather. Rian's breath was heavy as he ran through the ruins. The alien twins clutched tightly in his arms. The ground beneath his boots was uneven, littered with debris, broken weapons, and the bodies of those who hadn't been lucky enough to escape the battlefield. Every step sent dust into the air, and every breath tasted like smoke and death. But there was no time to think about that. He had to move. He had to survive. And more importantly, he had to get these twins out of here before the bounty hunters caught up. Behind him, the mercenaries were shouting orders. Their voices were distorted by their helmets, but Ryan could hear them clearly through his comms. They weren't just chasing him. They were tracking him. His cloaking device had helped him escape the first wave, but it wouldn't last forever. These bounty hunters were professionals, and they had tech far beyond the standard military gear. If he slowed down, even for a second, they would find him. And this time, they wouldn't miss. The twins were shaking in his arms, their tiny fingers gripping onto his armor like their lives depended on it. Maybe because they did. The older one, Eris, he thought her name was, kept glancing back, her glowing blue eyes filled with terror. The younger one, Nyx, had her face buried in his chest, her small frame trembling. "It's okay," Ryan muttered, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to reassure them or himself. "I won't let them take you." Eris looked up at him, her lips trembling, but she didn't speak. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she was too scared. Or maybe she just didn't trust him yet. Not that he could blame her. He was human, and as far as she knew, Humans were just as bad as the bounty hunters chasing them. A sudden explosion rocked the ground behind them. Ryan turned just in time to see fire and shrapnel flying through the air. The mercenaries were using explosives now. They weren't just trying to capture him. They were trying to cut off his escape. Damn it, Ryan cursed under his breath. His HUD flickered, warning him that his armor had taken minor damage from the shockwave. If they kept throwing grenades like that, it wouldn't be long before they boxed him in completely. He needed a way out. His eyes darted across the battlefield, scanning for an exit. Up ahead, he saw an old transport station, half collapsed but still standing. If he could get inside, he might be able to lose them in the tunnels below. It was risky. There was no telling what was waiting for him down there, but it was better than getting shot in the back. Ryan adjusted his grip on the twins and sprinted toward the station. His legs burned, his lungs screamed for air, but he pushed forward. Behind him, the bounty hunters were getting closer. He could hear their footsteps now, heavy and relentless. Eris suddenly gasped and pointed to the side. Ryan followed her gaze and saw a sniper perched on a broken building, his rifle aimed right at them. "Hold on," Ryan shouted. He dove forward just as the sniper fired. The bullet barely missed, grazing his shoulder and sending sparks flying off his armor. He hit the ground hard, rolling with the twins in his arms. Pain shot through his body, but he forced himself to keep moving. They reached the entrance of the station just as another explosion went off behind them. The force of it sent a shockwave through the air, knocking Ryan off balance. He stumbled, nearly dropping the twins, but caught himself at the last second. Without hesitating, he ducked inside the station, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. The place was a wreck. Broken platforms, shattered windows, and flickering emergency lights. But there was one thing he was counting on: the underground tunnels. Ryan ran toward the stairwell leading down, his boots echoing against the cracked tiles. The bounty hunters wouldn't risk following him down there, not without a plan. And that gave him time. He reached the bottom of the stairs and glanced back. The twins were still clinging to him, their eyes wide with fear. "Stay close," he whispered. "No matter what happens, don't let go." Eris nodded, holding onto Nyx tightly. Ryan led them deeper into the tunnels. The air was thick with dust and the smell of rusted metal. Water dripped from the ceiling, creating an eerie rhythm in the silence. But they weren't alone down here. Something was watching them. Ryan could feel it. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and his grip tightened on his rifle. He scanned the darkness, his finger resting on the trigger. Eris whimpered, pressing closer to him. Nyx clutched her sister's arm, her tiny body shivering. Then a sound. A low, guttural growl echoed through the tunnel. Ryan froze. He knew that sound. Velcari predators. They were native to this planet, massive beasts with razor-sharp claws and armored skin. They hunted in the darkness, using echolocation to track their prey. And right now, they had just found him. Ryan's mind raced. He couldn't fight them. Not with the twins to protect. He had to move. "Run," he whispered. Eris hesitated for a split second, but then she grabbed Nyx's hand and took off. Ryan was right behind them, his heart pounding. The growls grew louder. Then the first one appeared. A massive creature, almost twice the size of a human, crawled out from the shadows. Its eyes glowed a sickly yellow, its mouth lined with jagged teeth. It let out a piercing screech and lunged. Ryan fired without thinking. The bullets hit, but they barely slowed it down. The beast was too heavily armored. He cursed and threw a flash grenade. The explosion of light and sound sent the creature reeling, buying him a few precious seconds. "Keep going," he yelled. They ran through the tunnels, dodging debris and jumping over fallen beams. The creatures were still behind them, their growls filling the air. But up ahead, Ryan saw light. An exit. He pushed himself harder, forcing his burning legs to move faster. The twins were barely keeping up. But they didn't stop. They trusted him now. They reached the end of the tunnel and burst out into the open. Ryan spun around, grabbing a remote detonator from his belt. "Keep running," he ordered. Eris and Nyx didn't question him. They ran as fast as they could. Ryan waited until the creatures were right at the exit. Then he pressed the button. The tunnel collapsed in an explosion of fire and debris, sealing the creatures inside. Ryan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His hands were shaking, his body aching, but they were alive. He turned to the twins, who were staring at him in awe. "It's over," he said, trying to catch his breath. Eris took a step forward, her expression unreadable. Then, without warning, she threw her arms around him, hugging him tightly. Ryan stiffened, surprised. But slowly he let himself relax. Maybe, just maybe, he hadn't just saved them. Maybe they had saved him too. The night air was cold, but Ryan barely felt it. His body ached from the chase, and his lungs burned with every breath. But he had no time to rest. He needed to put as much distance as possible between himself and the bounty hunters before they tracked him again. The tunnel collapse had slowed them down, but it wouldn't stop them forever. The twins were still silent as they followed him, their glowing blue eyes flickering in the dim moonlight. Eris stayed close, gripping Nyx's hand tightly, her gaze darting around the darkened forest. They had left the ruins behind and entered a dense stretch of wilderness. The trees were tall and twisted, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching toward the sky. Shadows moved between them, and distant howls echoed through the air. But Ryan didn't stop. They finally reached a small clearing near a rocky outcrop, where Ryan decided to rest. He knelt down, scanning the area for threats before lowering his rifle. The ground was dry, covered in patches of grass and scattered leaves. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do for now. "We'll stop here," Ryan said, his voice low but firm. "Not for long, just enough to catch our breath." The twins exchanged a glance before settling down near the base of a tree. Eris pulled Nyx close, wrapping her arms around her sister protectively. Ryan sat a few feet away, watching them carefully. He had saved them, protected them, but he still didn't know anything about them. And something about their silence, about the way Eris kept looking at him, like she was trying to decide whether to trust him or not, made his instincts flare. They were hiding something. Eris blinked, clearly caught off guard. Nyx clutched her sister's arm, her small fingers trembling. You won't leave us?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Ryan shook his head. "Not a chance." Nyx's eyes filled with tears, and before he knew what was happening, she threw herself at him, wrapping her arms around his chest. Ryan stiffened, startled, but then he slowly placed a hand on her back. She was so small, so fragile, and yet she had survived so much. Eris watched, her expression unreadable. Then, after a moment, she sighed and nodded. "Okay," she said. "We'll trust you." Ryan felt something shift in the air between them. For the first time since this nightmare began, they weren't just running together. They were a team. But as Ryan looked up at the darkened sky, he knew one thing for certain. The bounty hunters wouldn't stop. And if they wanted to protect each other, they would have to fight. The night was alive with danger. Ryan crouched behind a fallen tree, his heart pounding against his ribs as he surveyed the approaching figures. The bounty hunters had found them. He had hoped for more time, but luck was never on his side. He had counted at least 8 of them, heavily armed, armored, and moving in coordinated silence. Professionals. Eris and Nyx huddled behind him, their breathing shallow. He could feel their fear, their uncertainty. They trusted him to protect them. And he wasn't about to let them down. He tightened his grip on his rifle. He had fought impossible battles before, had faced death more times than he could count. But this was different. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. The twins had suffered enough. He wasn't going to let them go back to that nightmare. A distant voice crackled through the bounty hunter's comms. Fan out. They're here. Ryan exhaled sharply. They were closing in, moving carefully, scanning the area with thermal optics. His standard cloak wouldn't be enough to hide from them for long. He needed a plan. His mind raced. The terrain was uneven. Scattered trees, large boulders, and a rocky cliffside to the east. If he could lead them into a bottleneck, he could control the fight. He turned his head slightly, whispering, "Stay low. Follow me." Eris nodded, gripping Nex's hand tightly as they moved. Every step was careful, every movement calculated. Ryan led them toward the cliffside, where a narrow pass between the rocks would force the bounty hunters into a choke point. But before they could reach it, a gunshot rang out. The ground beside Ryan exploded in a burst of dirt and rock. He dove forward, pulling the twins with him as more shots followed. They had spotted him. "Move," he shouted, pushing them ahead as he spun around, raising his rifle. His fingers squeezed the trigger, and the first hunter went down with a sharp cry. Another moved in from the side, firing in controlled bursts. Ryan ducked behind a tree, returning fire. His shots were precise, aimed for the gaps in their armor. Another enemy dropped, but they kept coming. They were fast, trained, and they had numbers. Ryan gritted his teeth. He needed to even the odds. Eris and Nyx scrambled behind a large rock as Ryan reached for a grenade. He pulled the pin, counted to 2, and threw it toward the advancing hunters. A deafening explosion shook the ground. Smoke and dust filled the air. Ryan didn't hesitate. He rushed forward, using the chaos to his advantage. His knife found its mark in the throat of one hunter, his rifle taking down another before they could react. But then something hit him hard. A shockwave sent him crashing against a tree, pain exploding in his ribs. His vision blurred as he struggled to breathe. A bounty hunter loomed over him, a massive brute in reinforced armor. "You should have stayed dead, soldier," the man growled, raising his weapon. Ryan barely managed to roll aside as the gun fired. The bark of the tree behind him shattered. He kicked out, knocking the man off balance before grabbing his own knife and driving it deep into his side. The brute choked, stumbling back, and Ryan finished him with a shot to the head. But there were still more. Gunfire erupted from the cliffside as the remaining hunters regrouped. Ryan turned, trying to spot Eris and Nyx. And then he saw her. Eris stood with her arms outstretched, her body shimmering with an unnatural glow. Ryan's breath caught. The bounty hunters hesitated. What the hell? And then Eris vanished. No, she didn't disappear. She blended. The air around her rippled like a heat wave, distorting her form until she was nothing but a faint outline. Then, before the hunters could react, she struck. She moved like a ghost, silent and deadly. A dagger flashed in her hand, slicing through armor, finding weak points. One hunter screamed as his throat was cut. Another collapsed as Eris plunged her blade into his back. Ryan watched, stunned. She wasn't just hiding. She was hunting. Nyx stayed behind cover, trembling, her eyes locked on her sister. The bounty hunters, now in full panic, turned their weapons in every direction, trying to track Eris. But she was too fast, too unpredictable. Ryan took advantage of the chaos, firing at the disoriented hunters. One by one, they fell. The last hunter, wounded, desperate, turned to run. But before he could escape, Eris reappeared in front of him. Her blue eyes glowed in the darkness. The hunter barely had time to scream before she ended it. Silence fell over the battlefield. Ryan lowered his weapon, his breathing ragged. The fight was over. He turned toward Eris, who stood frozen, her hands shaking. She looked down at them, at the blood on her fingers, and her expression wavered. The mask of a warrior cracked, revealing the scared girl underneath. Nyx ran to her, grabbing her arm. Eris. Eris dropped the dagger and pulled Nyx close, burying her face in her sister's hair. Ryan watched them for a moment before stepping closer. "You okay?" Eris didn't answer. Ryan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. He had seen that look before, the weight of taking a life. Even in war, it was never easy. But she had done what she had to do. He crouched down, meeting her gaze. "You saved us," he said gently. Eris swallowed hard, nodding. Ryan glanced at the bodies around them. They wouldn't be the last to come. But for now, they had won. He stood up, offering Eris his hand. She hesitated before taking it. Ryan pulled her up, then looked at Nyx. "We need to move." Nyx nodded, still clinging to her sister. Ryan took one last look at the battlefield, then turned toward the dark horizon. This fight wasn't over. Not yet. And he would do whatever it took to keep them safe. The air was thick with smoke, the scent of burnt metal and blood lingering in the atmosphere. Ryan's legs ached as he pushed forward, his body exhausted but his mind sharp. There was no room for hesitation now. The syndicate was closing in fast, and if they didn't keep moving, they would be surrounded. Eris and Nyx followed closely, their expressions filled with a mix of determination and fear. They had fought their way out of every trap so far, but this was different. The syndicate wasn't just sending bounty hunters anymore. This time, they had deployed something worse, something designed to eliminate problems quickly. Ryan's instincts screamed at him as he glanced at the distant sky. A low hum vibrated in the air. "They're bringing in drones," he muttered under his breath, gripping his rifle tighter. Eris stiffened. "What does that mean?" "It means we're running out of time," Ryan said. He could already hear the mechanical whir of approaching death. The syndicate didn't take chances when it came to high-value targets. If ground forces failed, they sent drones. Unmanned killing machines with no weaknesses, no hesitation, and no mercy. Ryan had seen them wipe out entire squads in minutes. They weren't built for capturing. They were built for extermination. He looked around, scanning for options. The terrain wasn't in their favor. They were trapped between the steep cliffside and the wreckage of a downed syndicate ship. There was no cover, no easy escape. Eris gritted her teeth. "We have to fight." Ryan shook his head. "We won't win in an open battle. Not against those things." Nyx's voice was small but firm. "Then what do we do?" Ryan exhaled, mind racing. They needed a distraction. Something big, something that could buy them time. He looked at the wreckage, his mind piecing together a desperate plan. He turned to the twins. "I'm going to rig the ship's core to blow. It'll take out the drones and the syndicate forces nearby." Nyx's eyes widened. "But you'll be..." "Yeah," Ryan cut in. "Which is why you two need to keep running." Eris' hands clenched into fists. "No, absolutely not." Ryan gave her a tired smirk. That wasn't a request. Before she could argue, the first drone appeared over the horizon, its sleek black frame cutting through the air like a silent predator. The others followed in formation, scanning the ground with eerie blue optics. Ryan's heart pounded. No more time. He sprinted toward the wreckage, ignoring Eris' protests. The ship's core was damaged, but still intact, just unstable enough that a few well-placed charges would turn it into a massive explosion. His fingers worked quickly, setting the detonators, his breath steady despite the chaos unfolding around him. The drones hovered closer, weapons charging. Syndicate soldiers were advancing from the west, their armored figures moving in deadly synchronization. Ryan clicked the last charge into place. Then a shadow moved behind him. Eris. She had followed him, her face set with stubborn determination. "I'm not leaving you," she said, her voice firm. Ryan gritted his teeth. "Eris, you have to go. Nyx needs you." "She needs both of us," Eris snapped. "You think we survived this long just to let you throw your life away?" Ryan hesitated. Then the first drone fired. He barely had time to shove Eris behind cover before the ground exploded beside them, sending dirt and metal flying. Syndicate soldiers opened fire from the west, their bullets tearing through the wreckage. Ryan returned fire, forcing them back, but they were outnumbered. Eris grabbed his arm. If you're staying, then so am I. Ryan stared at her, frustration and admiration clashing inside him. She wasn't just some helpless survivor anymore. She was a fighter. And she had made her choice. He let out a sharp breath. Fine. But we do this together. Eris nodded, grabbing her own weapon. Together. The battle erupted into chaos. Ryan and Eris fought side by side, taking down enemies as fast as they could. Nyx provided covering fire from a distance, her shots precise despite her trembling hands. The drones moved in, their cold, unfeeling optics locking onto Ryan. He dodged to the side as one fired, the blast missing him by inches. Another drone prepared to launch a missile. Eris sprinted forward, her body flickering as she activated her cloaking ability. The drone hesitated, its sensors unable to track her. Then she struck. Her knife plunged into its exposed wiring, and the drone shuddered before spiraling out of control, crashing into the cliffside in a burst of flame. Ryan didn't waste the opportunity. He raised his rifle, taking out another drone before it could react. The Syndicate soldiers hesitated, their formation breaking. They weren't prepared for a fight like this. Ryan smirked. Now's our chance. He activated the detonator. A loud beeping filled the air as the charges within the wrecked ship lit up. The Syndicate soldiers realized what was happening too late. Ryan grabbed Eris's wrist. Run. They bolted toward Nyx, who was already on the move. Behind them, the ship's core reached critical overload. Then, the explosion consumed everything. The force of the blast knocked them off their feet. Fire and metal filled the sky, the shockwave so strong it sent even the drones spiraling out of control. The Syndicate soldiers were obliterated in an instant, their bodies vanishing in the inferno. Ryan landed hard, pain jolting through his body. He groaned, forcing himself up, his vision swimming. Eris was beside him, coughing but alive. Nyx stumbled over, eyes wide with disbelief. The Syndicate was gone. The battlefield was silent. Ryan exhaled sharply, wiping blood from his forehead. Well, that worked. Nyx let out a shaky laugh. You're insane. Ryan grinned, but then he saw the look in Eris's eyes. She wasn't laughing. She was staring at him, a mix of relief and something deeper, something raw. You were really going to die for us, she whispered. Ryan's smirk faded. I told you. You're worth saving. Eris's breath hitched. For the first time since he had met them, she looked vulnerable. Not because of fear, but because she finally understood. Ryan had never seen her like this. And then she stepped forward, her hand brushing his. You saved us, she said softly. Now we're saving you. Ryan raised an eyebrow. What's that supposed to mean? Eris exchanged a glance with Nyx, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Then, Eris turned back to him, her blue eyes filled with an emotion Ryan couldn't quite place. It means we're staying with you, she said, no matter what. Ryan felt his chest tighten. He had spent his whole life fighting alone, protecting others. But this was different. This time, he wasn't alone. And for the first time, in a long, long time, he didn't want to be. The silence that followed the explosion felt unreal. The air, thick with smoke and dust, slowly began to settle, revealing the aftermath of their desperate fight. The sky, once filled with the threat of drones and the looming presence of the Syndicate, was now empty. The fire from the wreckage of the downed ship still flickered in the distance, but the immediate danger had passed. Ryan, Eris, and Nyx stood among the wreckage, breathing heavily, bodies covered in dirt and blood, but alive. They had made it through the battle, something Ryan hadn't been certain was even possible moments before. He glanced at the twins. Their faces were covered in soot, their expressions serious, but there was a sense of relief in their eyes. They had survived, against all odds. Eris wiped the blood from her cheek and gave him a small, exhausted smile. You really did it. You saved us. Ryan nodded, But his mind was already shifting toward the next steps. They couldn't stay here. The syndicate would regroup. They always did. They'd want to hunt them down, and the wreckage was the perfect place to start. "We need to move," Ryan said, his voice steady but urgent, "before they send reinforcements." The twins didn't argue. They had seen enough bloodshed, enough violence, to know when action was required. Ryan scanned the horizon, his eyes narrowing. They were on the edge of a forest, the vast stretch of wilderness offering some cover. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it would give them a few hours to rest and plan their next move. Without a word, they began walking, their steps quick but calculated. Ryan led the way, his mind always on the lookout for danger, but also focused on the lives that were now intertwined with his. The journey to the forest wasn't long, but it felt like a lifetime. Every step, every crack of a twig, made Ryan tense. The sounds of their battle had likely carried for miles, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something, was watching them. When they finally reached the cover of the trees, Ryan allowed himself a moment of respite. He leaned against a thick trunk, closing his eyes for just a second. Eris walked up to him, her expression serious, but there was something else, something softer in her gaze. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. Ryan opened his eyes and looked at her, meeting her gaze. "I'll be fine. Just need a minute." Eris seemed to understand, nodding without pushing him further. Instead, she took a seat nearby, her back against a tree, and Nyx followed suit. The twins hadn't spoken much since the explosion, but the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with an unspoken bond, one forged in the fires of battle, one that would likely carry them through whatever was to come. Ryan crouched down, pulling a small first aid kit from his bag. His wounds weren't severe, but the deep cuts and bruises needed attention. As he cleaned and patched himself up, he stole glances at the twins. Eris, once cold and distant, was now a different person. She had seen more of him than anyone had. She had seen his sacrifice, his willingness to give everything for her and her sister. And in her eyes, Ryan could see something changing, something more than just gratitude. When he finished treating his injuries, Ryan sat down on the ground beside them. Nyx was resting, but Eris still seemed alert, her eyes scanning the horizon, watching for any sign of danger. Ryan knew they were all exhausted, physically, emotionally, and mentally, but the fight was far from over. The syndicate was a vast network, and even if they had temporarily destroyed one of their main forces, there were always others, always more enemies lurking in the shadows. He couldn't let his guard down. Not now. "What's the plan now?" Eris asked, her voice calm but with an edge of concern. Ryan glanced at her, considering her question carefully. They had no permanent safe haven, no place to hide for long. But he knew one thing for sure. They couldn't go back to the old ways. The old life was over. "We move," Ryan said simply. "We keep moving until we find a place they can't reach us." Eris and Nyx exchanged glances. The uncertainty was still there, lingering in their eyes. The same uncertainty that Ryan had seen in his own reflection so many times. They had nothing. No allies, no resources, no home. But Ryan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. It was strange to feel it, after everything that had happened. After the endless battles, the bloodshed, the loneliness. But now, with the twins by his side, something was different. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were fighters, and they had the chance to build something new, something better. "We could go to the Outlands," Nyx suggested quietly, breaking the silence. "It's far from syndicate territory. There are some colonies out there, small ones, but they're independent. No one will care who we are." Ryan considered this for a moment. The Outlands were a dangerous place, filled with criminals, rebels, and lost souls. It wasn't the safest option, but it was a chance. And right now, chances were all they had. "Sounds good," Ryan agreed. "We'll head out tomorrow. Rest up tonight." As night fell, The three of them settled into the makeshift camp. There was no fire, nothing that could draw attention, but the stillness of the forest around them was oddly comforting. Ryan lay on the ground, his eyes on the stars above. The same stars he had seen for years, but tonight they felt different. Tonight, they felt like the beginning of something new. His thoughts drifted to Eris. She had changed since the first time they'd met. She had been cold, distant, almost unapproachable. But now she was something else, something more human, more alive. She had seen what Ryan had done for her, and she had seen how he had put himself at risk for their survival. Ryan wondered, not for the first time, what the future held for them. They couldn't keep running forever. They would have to fight again. But this time, it would be different. They weren't fighting alone. Eris stirred beside him. "Ryan," she whispered. He turned his head to look at her, surprised. "Yeah, thank you," she said softly, "for everything." He nodded, offering her a small smile. "I told you, I'm not leaving you." She smiled in return, her eyes glimmering in the moonlight. For the first time, Ryan felt like they might have a chance to build something together. The syndicate wouldn't stop coming after them. That much was clear. But for now, in this quiet moment, they had something more important. They had each other. And that was enough. As the night wore on and the stars shone brightly above them, Ryan closed his eyes, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. But for once, he felt ready for whatever came next. He wasn't alone anymore, and together, they would find a way to survive. Together, they would build a new future.